A shadow has fallen across South America, a darkness that whispers of violence, extortion, and fear. This is the reality brought by El Tren de Aragua, a name uttered in hushed tones from the slums of Caracas to the bustling streets of Santiago. Born in the chaos of a Venezuelan prison, this gang has become a transnational criminal enterprise. Its tentacles reach far and wide, leaving a trail of misery and bloodshed in its wake. El Tren de Aragua is not just another gang, it is a force of nature. It thrives on exploiting the vulnerable, preying on the weak, and corrupting the very fabric of society. This is their story, a chilling account of how a band of criminals rose to become one of the most feared organizations in the Americas. It is a story of survival, greed, and the insatiable hunger for power. This is not a story for the faint of heart. It is a reminder that monsters do exist, not in the shadows, but in plain sight. They walk among us, their faces hidden, their motives dark. This is the reality we must confront, a reality where the lines between good and evil are blurred by desperation and driven by profit. Venezuela, a nation blessed with oil wealth, has fallen victim to corruption and mismanagement. From this breeding ground of despair, El Tren de Aragua emerged, a predator in a collapsing ecosystem. They rose from the ashes of a failed state, capitalizing on chaos and exploiting the desperation of their countrymen. It began in the notorious Tocaron prison, a place where the lines between guards and inmates blurred. Here, amidst the squalor and violence, El Tren de Aragua was forged. They were not content with ruling the prison yard, their ambition stretched beyond the barbed wire fences. They sought to control the arteries of crime that flowed throughout Venezuela and beyond. Their rise was swift and brutal. They extorted local businesses, controlled drug trafficking routes, and terrorized anyone who dared to stand in their way. They were a hydra, each head more ruthless than the last. Their influence spread like a virus, infecting every corner of Venezuelan society. And then, they began to look outward. The borders of Venezuela were no longer constraints but gateways to expand their empire of crime. They set their sights on neighboring countries, carrying their brand of violence and intimidation with them. This was just the beginning. El Tren de Aragua was no longer a local problem, it was a regional threat, and it was growing stronger by the day. Tocaron Penitentiary. Even the name evokes a sense of dread. Located in the heart of Venezuela, this prison is not just a place of confinement, it is a crucible where criminals are hardened, and alliances are forged in blood. Tocaron is a microcosm of Venezuela's failures, a breeding ground for corruption and violence where the inmates, not the guards, hold the true power. Within Tocaron's decaying walls, amidst the stifling heat and the stench of sweat and despair, El Tren de Aragua took root. It began with a handful of inmates, hardened criminals who understood that survival within this concrete jungle demanded unity and ruthlessness. They banded together, offering protection to the weak in exchange for loyalty and obedience. Their leader, a man known as El Niño Guerrero, or the Boy Warrior, was a charismatic and ruthless figure. He possessed a chilling blend of charisma and brutality that inspired both fear and loyalty. Under his command, El Tren de Aragua tightened its grip on Tocaron, controlling everything from the flow of drugs and weapons to the very lives of the inmates. They operated with impunity, their power extending beyond the prison walls. Corrupt officials, bribed with a share of the profits, turned a blind eye to their activities. In Tocaron, El Tren de Aragua was not just another gang, they were the law. So, El Tren de Aragua, they were in charge inside Tocaron prison, but they wanted more. A lot more. Venezuela was having a tough time. The economy was bad, and the government wasn't doing so well. El Tren de Aragua saw this as a chance to grow their criminal business. They wanted to be powerful outside the prison too. At first, they did small-time crimes. They would threaten local shops for money, sneak things in and out of prison, and sell a little bit of drugs. But they were really good at being bad. They knew that if people were scared of them, they would win. So they used fear to control everyone. If anyone tried to stop them, they would threaten them and make them be quiet. As they got more powerful, they got bolder. They started taking over real businesses. They would use threats and violence to get money from store owners, trucking companies, even people in the government. They also took over worker unions, using them to get even richer. They were everywhere in Venezuela. The government was too weak and messed up to stop them. El Tren de Aragua got stronger and stronger with every bad thing they did, every time they got money by threats, and every illegal deal they made. El Tren de Aragua was not content with simply controlling territory. They understood the power of networks, of establishing a web of influence that extended far beyond their immediate control. They began to recruit aggressively, targeting not just hardened criminals but also desperate youths, offering them a sense of belonging and the promise of wealth and power. Their recruitment tactics were as diverse as their operations. They preyed on the vulnerable, offering protection and opportunity to those with limited options. Disenfranchised youths, struggling families, and even refugees fleeing Venezuela's economic crisis were drawn into their web. They established a system of franchises allowing local gangs to operate under the El Tren de Aragua banner in exchange for a cut of the profits. This provided them with a steady stream of income and allowed them to expand their reach rapidly without the need to directly control every territory. This network, bound by loyalty, fear, and the promise of profit, became El Tren de Aragua's most powerful weapon. It allowed them to operate with impunity, their tentacles reaching into every corner of Venezuelan society and beyond. They were no longer just a gang, they were a syndicate, a force to be reckoned with. El Tren de Aragua's rise to power wasn't fueled by ideology. It was pure greed, turning Venezuela's misery into their criminal enterprise. They became a one-stop shop for all things illegal, from extortion to drug trafficking. They preyed on businesses, controlled smuggling routes, and exploited refugees. Their greed knew no bounds, and their willingness to use violence made them a force to be reckoned with. El Tren de Aragua expanded beyond Venezuela, exploiting migrant routes and establishing a criminal network across South America. They infiltrated Colombia, Peru, Brazil, and Chile, forming alliances with local gangs. Their presence increased violence and instability, impacting local communities. We hear a lot about drug wars and extortion, but the real story is much sadder. It's about the hurt they cause to everyday people. Communities live in fear, scarred by violence. Shopkeepers give their earnings to the gang. Always afraid, they risk their lives. Families are torn apart. The gang's cruelty knows no bounds. The rise of El Tren de Aragua has not gone unnoticed. Law enforcement agencies across South America are mobilizing to combat this transnational criminal organization. However, tackling El Tren de Aragua is no easy task. The gang's transnational reach and corruption complicate efforts. Despite challenges, joint operations have led to significant arrests and seizures. International organizations like Interpol support intelligence sharing and cross-border investigations. The brutality of El Tren de Aragua leaves more than just physical scars. The psychological trauma inflicted on their victims, the erosion of trust in communities, and the normalization of violence create wounds that run deep, often in the world. Despite the pervasive fear and the seemingly insurmountable challenges, glimmers of hope persist in the fight against El Tren de Aragua. Amidst the stories of loss, despair, and resignation, there are also tales of resilience, courage, and a refusal to let the darkness extinguish the human spirit. In communities ravaged by El Tren de Aragua's violence, grassroots organizations are emerging, led by mothers who have lost children, by teachers determined to protect their students, and by young people yearning for a better future. They are organizing workshops to educate youth about the dangers of gang recruitment, providing support for victims of violence, and working to rebuild the social fabric torn apart by fear. Law enforcement agencies, though often hampered by corruption and a lack of resources, are beginning to achieve some successes. Joint operations between countries are disrupting El Tren de Aragua's transnational networks, dismantling their operations, and bringing some of their leaders to justice. The fight against El Tren de Aragua is far from over. It will require a sustained and coordinated effort from governments, law enforcement, and, most importantly, from the communities most affected by their violence. The battle against El Tren de Aragua is a daily struggle for law enforcement across South America. Outnumbered and outgunned, police walk a tightrope between enforcing the law and becoming targets themselves. In Venezuela, the fight is particularly perilous. Years of economic crisis have hollowed out the police force, leaving it vulnerable to corruption. El Tren de Aragua's tentacles extend deep into the state apparatus. Despite these challenges, brave men and women continue to confront the gang. They conduct raids, seize weapons and drugs, and gather intelligence, often facing retaliation from the gang. Their work is often thankless, their victories overshadowed by violence. Yet, they persevere, driven by duty and hope. As El Tren de Aragua's reach has extended beyond Venezuela's borders, so too have the efforts to combat their influence. Recognizing the transnational nature of the threat, countries across South America and beyond are increasingly working together, sharing intelligence, coordinating operations, and pooling resources to dismantle the gang's networks. Interpol, the International Criminal Police Organization, has issued red notices for some of El Tren de Aragua's top leaders, making them wanted fugitives subject to arrest and extradition if they cross international borders. Joint task forces have been established, bringing together law enforcement agencies from different countries to share expertise, conduct joint investigations, and target the gang's financial assets. These collaborations have yielded some successes. Joint operations have led to the arrest of key figures in El Tren de Aragua's hierarchy, the seizure of large quantities of drugs and weapons, and the disruption of human trafficking rings. However, challenges remain. Differences in legal systems, language barriers, and a lingering mistrust between some countries can hinder cooperation. El Tren de Aragua is quick to exploit any weaknesses, shifting their operations to countries with less robust law enforcement or where corruption provides them with a degree of protection. The fight requires constant adaptation, a willingness to share information freely, and a recognition that only by working together can these criminal networks be effectively dismantled. The fight against El Tren de Aragua extends far beyond the realm of law enforcement. It requires addressing the root causes that have allowed the gang to flourish: poverty, inequality, corruption, and a lack of opportunity. It also demands a commitment to healing the wounds inflicted on communities, providing support for victims, and breaking the cycle of violence that has ensnared a generation. Across South America, organizations and individuals are working tirelessly to address these complex challenges. Community leaders, educators, social workers, and former gang members are joining forces to offer young people alternatives to the allure of gangs, providing educational opportunities, job training, and safe spaces where they can find support and mentorship. Support groups are emerging to help victims of El Tren de Aragua's violence cope with the trauma they have endured. Psychologists, therapists, and social workers provide counseling, therapy, and legal aid, helping survivors rebuild their lives and find hope amidst the wreckage. These efforts are crucial, for they recognize that true security cannot be achieved solely through law enforcement. It requires investing in communities, empowering individuals, and creating a future where young people are offered genuine opportunities and hope, breaking the cycle of poverty, violence, and despair that has fueled the rise of El Tren de Aragua. The Aragua train. Even the name scares people who know what they do. Bad guys doing bad things are still a huge problem. This bad group from Tocaron prison is still around. They cause trouble in other countries. They use violence, bribes, and taking advantage of people. Fighting them is like a never-ending game of hide-and-seek. Countries around the world know how dangerous they are. They want to work together. The Aragua train looks for the weakest people and places. They use problems with the police and greedy people to do bad things. Even though the threat of El Tren de Aragua is very real, there's still hope. In the communities hurt by the gang's violence, there's a spirit of fighting back. People want to take back their lives and build a better future. Groups of ordinary people are working hard to give kids a different path. They offer schooling, job training, and safe places. Police are making progress. They're breaking up the gang's networks. Countries are starting to work together, but the road ahead isn't easy. The problems that helped El Tren de Aragua grow are still here. It's a battle against bad things that try to crush people's hopes and dreams. It's a fight that needs everyone to work together and never give up hope. The story of El Tren de Aragua is a warning. It shows us that the bad things we do can grow into terrible monsters, but it also shows us how strong people can be. We don't know what the future holds, but the fight goes on. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more content like this. It really helps the channel. Until next time, take care of each other.